Thank you for joining us at the ever-improving No Soundbites Allowed podcast. My name is Michael Vasquez. We thank you for joining us in this adventure of describing the politics that go on in our nation on a personal and local level as often as possible, giving you, the audience, more than just 30 seconds to understand what's going on in our nation. We look forward to joining you as we go. Just sit back, enjoy the ride. Please remember, if you like the episodes, like it, share it, let other people know, and if you can, please donate, even if it's $2, even if it's $5, because it all makes a difference. We thank you, and here we go. Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us here at the No Soundbites Allowed podcast. This is your host, Michael Voss, the Dragon of the Southern Tier. I am happy to be here with you. Thank you for joining us. You make it all possible. You're the reason why I do this, and I appreciate it, and I thank you for it, because you guys are great, and I thank you for that. Now, we have a big episode here. I'm going to try and condense a lot of things, and please bear with me, because it's a lot of information I want to get across today. Now, first of all, I do want to mention that we didn't have the Facebook Live simulcast today, because I just got back from an event. I've been very busy, and that's what took me away, and I apologize for that. But I may do it on Sunday instead. Still not sure about that. And I'm going to talk about where I was and what I observed at the event that I was at this morning, which is August 4th. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. It's in Cortland, and I'll talk about it. But what I want to talk about first is something that's been bugging me. It's not a pet peeve, but it's an issue that I think needs to be discussed. And it's kind of annoying. And that's because you may recall I've talked about the Broome County Sheriff race before. I've talked about Matt Ryan, who's running on the Working Families Party, and he's the candidate of Citizen Action. He's the social justice warrior without experience who's looking to turn the position into an activist position to support social justice ideas. And I've talked about that at length. And I think he's completely unqualified for the position. I think it's just an insult to the public for him to even try this. But that being said, that's my personal opinion. You may disagree. Vote for him if you think that's what you want. But the thing that got me upset and why I'm bringing this up is there was, of course, the race between the two Republicans. There was the incumbent Sheriff David Harder and the challenger, Jason Ellis, who's also in the Sheriff Department, who was looking to take on that position. And so that would have become a primary in September 13th, and the Republicans in Broome County would have had the opportunity to make a choice between the two men and vote for whomever they thought was best, and that candidate would have then gone on in November to be the Republican candidate going up against Matt Ryan. But that is not the case, because what happened instead is that we had the choice taken away from the people. The executive board of Broome County GOP, the Republican Party, Mr. B. Joy Data, Mr. Paul Savage, made a decision for the people and chose to challenge Jason Ellis. Now, let me stop there. Challenges are normal. If you may recall, in July, there was, in all the parties, people were going out, getting signatures to get candidates onto the ballots. It's part of the petition process. It's absolutely normal. Everyone does that. And you get the X number of signatures. In this case, I think it was 1,000. And once you have that 1,000 in the Broome County Sheriff's race, you're considered on the ballot. And then you have the primary if there's two people in the same party looking for that same position. Fine. That's all standard. That's all normal. And normally there are challenges. There's a limit. Normally, rule of thumb is in politics, you always want to get like 50% more signatures than you need, just so because your opponent's going to challenge you or someone else will challenge you, and that if you don't have enough, you'll get kicked out. It's kind of like what happened to Martin Babinek back in 2016. He had gone out, he got a lot of signatures, I believe it was under the Independence Party, and when he got the signatures, there were several irregularities and illegalities that were done, and that caused him to be taken off the ballot. He lost 60% of all of his signatures because of those irregularities, and so he lost that line to be voted on in the election. And so that's one example of it. But besides Martin Babinec, what we see here is Jason Ellis had roughly 1,050 signatures, just over the limit to get him onto the race. So you would have expected there would be a challenge, normally from his opponent. It's standard. It's part of the election process. Whether you like it or not, that's just how it goes. And so we were expecting he would get a challenge, but the challenge didn't come from Sheriff David Harder. It didn't come from another citizen, which citizens are able to do. It didn't come from Matt Ryan on the other side, from working families trying to reduce or choose who was going to be his challenger, who was going to be competing with him for that race. No, the choice came down to Paul Savage, the Broome County Republican Party made a choice of two Republicans and said, well, we like this one, in this case, Sheriff Dave Harder, better than we like Jason Ellis. And so they put the challenge through. That is wrong. And I have to mention it. And I know there's going to be a lot of Republicans that are pissed off at me about saying this and even bringing this up, but it needs to be said. And this is my principle. This is what I stand by. I was upset about it in 2013, 2014, when I watched this happen in Broome County before. And I'm still upset about it now because it's wrong. The executive board of the Democratic Party, Working Families Party, Republican Party, Conservatives, I don't care which one it is, the Libertarians, it doesn't matter. I don't believe they have a right to step in and tell the rank and file members who their choices are going to be. If the rank and file members signed the petitions and they signed enough petitions, then that is not a choice for the party to decide. That's a choice for the people to make. Now, if that person loses the challenge on the petitions, which is standard procedure in every race, that's part of the process. That's fine. But the leadership don't get to choose. It's not their right. It is the right of the rank and file members and those who are in the race to make a decision like that. And when that choice is taken away from the public, I think it's wrong and it needs to be brought up. And so, and I know there's going to be Republicans who are upset with me because I even brought this up. Be upset. It's not the first time you've been upset with me. It won't be the last time you're upset with me. This is my principles. This is what I stand by. And whether it's dirty laundry or not, it's wrong. And people should be called out when they do something wrong like this. I didn't like it when Tim Griffin was doing a bait and switch with Democratic candidates, the Democratic Party, the rank and file members getting signatures only to hand it off to Tariq Abdelazim because they weren't telling the truth to the voters. Well, guess what? This isn't fair either. Voters made a choice, and that choice was taken away by the party, the leadership. That's just as wrong as what Mr. Griffin did. I called him out for what he did. I'm calling out Bijoy Data for what he's done. So that's just the way it is. And people will be upset with me if you want to. But I want to get that off my chest. Now, going on from that local race, I want to talk a little bit more about what happened here today, very briefly. I was out in Cortland County, the city of Cortland, and there was an event today. And it's kind of interesting because I know a lot of people have heard how Anthony Brindisi, he's running for the New York 22nd District. He's out and about and he's been having commercials and flyers and talking to people online and saying that, Claudia Tenney, the incumbent congresswoman from the New York 22nd District, doesn't hold town halls, that she doesn't speak to the people. And it's kind of funny because I was in Cortland, and this is the third event I am aware of where the public was invited to speak with Claudia Tenney, and I was there. I've been there twice out of the three events since June of this year, 2018, and it's not what Anthony Brindisi said. Quite literally, today, August 4th, at 10:30, I was in Cortland at the M&D Deli, and I was having coffee, and that's what they called the event, Coffee with Claudia. They didn't call it a town hall, and that may be why protesters didn't swarm the event, but the reality is what did happen is about 36 people, about 36 people came out to have coffee and listen to Claudia Tenney and ask her questions. That's what happened. You know what? That's what Anthony Brindisi would call a town hall. In fact, that's about as many people as he got in Tioga County when he was in Owego, and I was there at that event when he didn't answer my question about the red flag laws, which is on video, and I was videotaping the entire event, and he was watching me videotape it. He approved of that. That event had about 36 people. Okay, and what's the difference between the two events? Both events were publicly acknowledged. Both events had public individuals coming in. Members of both parties were present and able to ask questions of the candidates. And both of these events, I was present. What's the difference? One of the big differences, Anthony Brindisi in his event in Owego, there were signs all over the place, as has been in every event he's had in Norwich and Binghamton and Owego and every event that I've known of, also the one he had in Herkimer County, where he does not allow any recording. And there's a whole big battle about that. Even though he invited the press to the event, even though the event was at a public space, Anthony decided he wanted to have an argument about that, and he didn't want anyone recording him, which means he's afraid. And I'm not surprised, because he doesn't always answer questions, as I have proven in the past. And with his own words, and showing you both in transcript form and in audio form, listening to him and also video, that he doesn't answer questions of those who are present. And that may be why he doesn't want to have it recorded. And his answers change depending on who he's talking to on each of and many of the subjects. So that may be why he doesn't want people to record him. And that's what I've observed, and that's what I've provided to you, the public. But with Claudia Tenney's event, there is no sign. There was no sign that said no one could record. There was no one who was going around saying, you have a recording device, please turn it off. There was no one who was trying to stop people from recording it or making it public. There's a big difference. And for me, that's one of the critical differences, that a candidate was able to speak to the public. No one was stopped from coming in. No one was questioned. There was no person who said, oh, you can't come in, or we got to worry about that person. Everyone was let in. Everyone was able to speak, and it was a very nice event. So I wanted to share that with you, that there's the difference. There's a reality. Today, August 4th, not the first time, but the third time in Cortland County, in the city of Cortland, that I'm aware of, Claudia Tenney is having an event which is open to the public. People are speaking. Did she call it a town hall? No. Was it a town hall? Yes. Would Anthony Brindisi have called it a town hall? Absolutely. That's what he's done in the past. He has 36 people come in, and even though they're almost all Democrats, that's fine. He's a Democratic candidate. They come in and they ask certain questions, and he tries to make sure that no one can record him at an event. Although we see the same thing with Claudia Tenney, and Anthony says, well, that doesn't count. Please tell me what the difference is, Anthony. I've been at both of those events, yours and hers. They're exactly the same, with that one exception. And other than that, and the fact that Anthony Brindisi doesn't answer questions, as I have proven, then, I don't see the difference. Is she having town halls? Absolutely. I've been to them. And if you look online, I know that you will be able to see that there is video of the event that has taken place with Claudia Tenney on August 4th in Cortland County at the M&D Deli. So, Anthony, you're misleading people because it's not a fact. The fact is there are events going on. They're not called town halls. They're called Coffee with Claudia, as an example. She's out and about with the people. So you're wrong. And I just wanted to mention that. So that's why I wasn't able to do the Facebook Live event today with everyone, because I was at that event to see what the reality is based on the accusations by Anthony Brindisi and how unfounded they were, because the reality, as I've observed more than once, is completely different than what he's saying. And that's just, the way he likes to put it out there. But I'm not going to focus on that. There are other things that we want to talk about, like unemployment. I want to talk about the Trump anxiety disorder. That's right, TAD. I want to talk about TAD. It's a real thing, folks. It is actually a real thing, and I'm going to go into that. So we're going to take a quick break, then I'll come back, and we'll talk about TAD and what that means and what I think, what we can think about that, because I think it's quite telling. But before that, let's take the little break, and then I'll be right back.
I ain't had your waist. I don't even remember how you taste on my lips. Used to be something I needed. Now I see I had a reason. I was bummed out, stressed out, yeah. I'm breaking the habit. I'm breaking the habit. I'm breaking the habits that I had, 'cause look where it's got me. Searching for myself, didn't know I lost me. I ain't no saint. Let the devil have a way. I regret it every day. I was bummed out, stressed out, yeah. Think you made me feel the best I had. For a minute I thought I needed to. Now I'm seeing through all of the reasons that I made up in my head. I'm breaking the habit. I'm breaking the habit. I'm breaking the I'm breaking the habit. I'm breaking the habit. I'm breaking the I'm breaking the habit. I'm breaking the
Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining me back here at No Soundbites Allowed with your favorite host, Michael Voss, the Dragon of the Southern Tier. And we are happy, as always, to be here with you because we do appreciate everything you do. We thank you all because you make it worthwhile, and I thank you for that. And so I did want to just also include, before I go on, as I mentioned about TAD, and we're going to talk about that in a second, I did want to mention for anyone who wants to double check, you can go to the Claudia for Congress on Facebook. Go there and you'll be able to see the event. It was published 2 hours ago, some of the photos from the event talking about it. And so just another verification that, yeah, she is talking to just average people at events and at places. And some of the people may have taken pictures with her and noticed that she was also at the Cortland Arts and Wine Festival. And she was walking around talking with people at the event after she had gotten done with her coffee event with the public. And so when Anthony says, when I hear people say, oh, she doesn't talk to people, it's just not factually correct. It's just not. It just doesn't get a lot of press, but that's besides the point. It's not factually correct. But anyway, we wanted to talk about TAD. Now, you may or may not have noticed that in Newsweek this week, there was an article about a week ago, actually, 7 days ago, last week, Saturday. So it didn't get a lot of attention at the time. But it's the fact that therapists are reporting that there's been a rise in anxiety associated with President Donald Trump. In fact, they call it Trump anxiety disorder. It's a term that's been coined by the American Psychological Association. And they've been talking about the fact that there's been a lot of anxiety that's been rising in the nation in patients since 2016 and the election. So literally, the election came out and people started freaking out. And I'm sure you've seen plenty of video watching and showing how some Democrats, some individuals across the nation have lost their minds because President Donald Trump was elected and Hillary Clinton wasn't. And they were shocked and amazed and lost their minds because they couldn't possibly believe that anyone but Hillary would win. Well, in fact, that's what happened. And so they're stressed. And we see that a lot. And they're stressed with not only President Donald Trump, but anything that's going on in politics today. Brian Kavanaugh, who is in the most likely going to be the next Supreme Court justice, they're losing their minds over him. Even though he's had over 300 cases, he was approved by Democrats to become the appellate judge and to work on the Ninth District Court to help decide some of the things that go to the Supreme Court. Besides, he's made many decisions and he's spoken about so many subjects legally about cases that are important to the nation. And no one's ever had a question or challenge to him based on his judicial insight. But now they lose their minds on it. In fact, we see constantly, there has been a nonstop, constant fear in the nation. If you look at CNN, if you look at MSNBC, if you look at most of the liberal news media, they are constantly telling us how much doom is out there, that the world is going to end. North Korea is going to be in a war with the United States because President Trump is talking to them. Russia is going to start a war because President Trump is talking to them. That we're going to have a war with China. We're going to have a war with everybody. And the economy is going to fall off the face of the earth and everyone's going to be unemployed. And there's going to be not just a recession, but a complete depression. Meanwhile, we have 3.9 unemployment. We have the lowest unemployment for women in 65 years. All-time records of low unemployment for African Americans and for Hispanic Americans. We see that the self-employment number is through the roof. It's up about 500,000 per month from where it was trending before throughout the entire 8 years under President Obama. Don't have to believe me. Go to the St. Louis Fed, look up the chart yourself. You'll see downward trend throughout all of the 8 years of President Obama, all 8 years. After the recession, before the recession, all the way, just straight line down. And now we have a trend up and stabilizing and moving higher, which means jobs are being created and that people are going to work, which is why we see the 3.9% unemployment rate from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. The facts are there. We're told the economy is horrible, yet people are having more money go into their 401ks for their retirement. People investing are getting more money. That we're seeing the stock market rising up higher and better. We're seeing improvements. And some of these things have, there's day-to-day ups and downs, of course, because, the economy isn't a straight line. But what is the trend? And what are we seeing consistently over time? That we're doing better. That tax cuts have worked. That we're seeing people have more money in their pockets. They're able to buy more things. They're able to invest more. And they're able to create jobs, which weren't possible before. And yet Democrats are telling us that it's absolutely the worst thing that could possibly happen and that the economy is going to be absolutely destroyed. And don't think about the fact that under President Obama, the economy had our national debt double. He's the only president who's ever doubled the national debt. He added $10 trillion. That's empirical. That's not a question. It is a fact that under President Obama, 8 years, we doubled the national debt by $10 trillion. And we didn't have any jobs to show for that. We didn't have any economic growth to show for that. And we just had 4.2% second quarter growth for the nation. President Obama said that's not even possible to get past, that getting to 3% was impossible and no longer the norm for America. So I can understand how some of these Democrats in the Democratic Party have an issue when they hear this and they see these facts. They're being told one thing by the news, doom, horror, it's terrible, it's terrible. And yet on the other side of it, we're seeing all the empirical data say, no, there is no doom. We're actually doing fine. The fact that we're looking at ceasing and having the 65-year war, I believe it's 65 or is it 55 years, of the Korean War is going to come to an end. And that's something that we've never heard of. No president has gotten this close to having that war end because we've been in a ceasefire and actually have it end and have some form of peace in the Korean Peninsula in our lifetime. It's actually started that process. Whether or not it's completed under this president, I don't know. No one knows that for sure, but we're closer today than we have been in the last 50 years for the first time, actually 60 years. And, President Trump was able to do that. No one else. So they're hearing one side, there's doom, it's horrible, it's terrible, oh my God, it's all over. And then on the other side, they're seeing the reality of, no, it's not. So I can understand some people have anxiety about that. They don't know what to think about it. They're freaking out. They're losing their minds because he's got to be horrible. He's got to be terrible. The news tells me that, and we all know. I mean, it's the implied thought. If the news said it, it must be true. If it's on TV, it must be true. If it's on the internet, it must be true, which is none of those things are ever a given fact. Just because it's on TV, just because the news said it, just because you saw it on the internet, doesn't mean it's true. Just means that someone said they think it's true. And they want you to believe that. And whether or not you believe it is up to you, and whether or not you can source it out and find out the facts behind it. Because more often than not, we're not getting the complete truth. I've seen that time and time again. This week, Wednesday, August 1st, I was at there was in Broome County, we had all of the political leaders, Congresswoman Claudia Tenney. We had Assemblywoman Donna Lopardo, Assemblyman Clifford Crouch, State Senator Fred Akshar, Mayor of Binghamton, Rich David. We had legislators, Dan Reynolds. We had city council members, Giovanni Scaringi. We had Sophia Resinetti. We had Chris Papistrat. Just dozens and dozens of the political leaders of Broome County all in one room, along with small, mid-sized, and large business leaders in Broome County at the Greater Binghamton Chamber of Commerce. And I wrote an article about this, about the event, and I also published the entire event. They had the guest speaker of E.J. McMahon, who's from the Empire Center, and I was able to provide video coverage of that entire breakfast, the entire event, and everybody who was there, trying to figure out how to improve the New York State economy, and in particular the southern tier and Broome County, and to reinvigorate the economy and to create better, higher quality, higher pay jobs, and to move this area into to resurrect this area economically, which is needed, considering that we've lost over 1.2 million people in the state of New York, and the leading county for that exodus is from Broome County. We've lost more people than any other county. And we've seen a decrease in the population that has been severe. And it's been obviously negatively impacting it. And we want to turn that around. And yet, when the news media, as my example, going to that example, I did have a new reporter from the Press and Sun that was sitting next to me throughout the entire thing. We showed up at 7 a.m. We left the event at about 11:30. We were there from beginning to end, and every other news media in the region showed up for about 7 minutes at different points throughout the event. 7 minutes. That was the longest one I noticed. They were there, they taped for about 7 minutes, then they left. How can you get the full story? We're talking about a 3-hour event. We're talking a 3-hour event. I put out video of the guest speaker speaking for over an hour, all the political leaders, all the business leaders, and the major news covered it in about 2 minutes or less. Really? You can't say that the news is giving you all the truth and all the facts when they take a 3-hour event and they summarize it in 2 minutes and show you a 1-minute video of an event that they were only there for 7 minutes of. They were there for 7 minutes out of 3 hours. Do you think they got the most important minutes? They didn't know what was in the speech. They had no way of knowing. They didn't try. I did. I taped it. I put it out unedited for the public to see. And you can look that up, and that's at the mvass.com website, and you can look that up for yourself. But it just, again, this all connects. We know that the media is looking at the news and events in the news when they cover it, if they cover it. By the way, this morning at the Coffee with Claudia, where the public was invited and open to come to this event, no news media came to the event. So when they choose to show up in an event and they're there, they take, no matter how long the event is, they're taking a fraction of the time, 7 minutes out of 3 hours at the protest, which was an hour. They were there for like 45 minutes. They're there for a fraction of the time of the event, and they show you a sliver, 2 minutes or a minute of actual information about the event that doesn't encapsulate that event. I mean, you just can't. You cannot cover a multi-hour event in 30 seconds. You just can't do it. It's not possible. And so obviously when you're just trying to summarize, you're not even summarizing. You're basically commenting on an event because you can't be accurate. You're commenting on an event in about a minute and a half. Literally, they go 2 minutes or less. Usually it's about a minute and a half on a big story. And you're commenting on this, and people are not getting the correct information or a complete understanding of the event. And that's going to raise up some anxiety. I can understand that. But I really think that it's kind of funny that this Trump anxiety disorder, is centered around a president, and they don't know what to do with themselves. I mean, where was the Obama anxiety disorder? And you can't tell me that there wasn't a large portion of the nation throughout the entire time he was there, 40+%, 50% of the nation, that were directly opposed to his ideas, his management, his administration, his appeasement of governments around the world, his failures economically. And quite honestly, they are. Look at the empirical data. Just look it up. You'll see it for yourself. Don't take my word for it. Even if you want to disagree with me, you can't deny the facts of the numbers. And that's fine. But I didn't see anyone running around saying, I have an anxiety disorder. Oh my God, President Obama is stressing me out so much, I don't know what to do with myself. And the news media was just as bad with Obama in terms of multi-hour events shrunk down to 2 minutes. It's a little comment on this big event that no one really gets to have full details on. So, I mean, the media didn't change. The environment and the way they're disseminating information didn't change. So why are people freaking out now? Well, the only answer I have for you is because the media is telling people. The difference with Obama versus Trump is Obama, everything was bright and sunny and everything was perfect. Didn't matter how bad it was perfect. President Obama is bowing and appeasing nations throughout the world, saying America's horrible. That's a great thing. Good job. He's wonderful. Even though our relations with everyone in the world was getting worse. Remember when we got caught spying on Germany and the Chancellor Angela Merkel? We got caught doing that, and also with France. And they were pissed at us, and our relations with those nations went significantly worse. But yet, it's okay because Obama was talking about it and he apologized, and Obama's just a great guy. So people didn't get anxious about it, even though we just had one of our allies really, really pissed off at us, and not in a positive way. When our relations with Israel had some of its lowest levels in modern history under President Obama, we didn't see people freaking out. Don't worry. Well, President Obama is trying to get peace in the Middle East, and this is just part of the process. And pissing off Israel is okay because we're improving things with Libya, even though Benghazi, they killed our people, but we're improving things. Okay, but now when you hear President Trump, look, we're closer to peace than ever before in the Korean Peninsula. We are closer to that. We have a real start towards that process with a rogue nuclear nation. And we are able to have more talks and the possibility of peace in our lifetime that has eluded us for 6 decades. And, that's just horrible because we're going to go into World War III. Well, if you're phrasing it like that, and all I'm getting is that's the only message you have to say is we're going to go into World War III because we're talking to North Korea, a rogue nation, and leave out the fact that we're talking about peace and they're trying to end a war that no one else has been able to achieve through a process. Yes, unconventional as it is, we're actually getting there. Well, no wonder people have distress. So I don't think it's Trump anxiety disorder. I think it's news anxiety disorder. The news is making people anxious because the way they want them to see the world, the way they're trying to shape people's minds and thoughts is not working with the reality of what is happening. And there is a disconnect. You want to talk about a dissociative personality? Well, there you go. The reality doesn't match what you're told. What you're told to think and believe isn't matching what's actually happening there in the empirical data that you can look up. Yeah, people are going to have a complex. Some people. So I think that's what it is. But I just find it really funny. And I can tell you that part of that is also why we're seeing things like that understanding that there's a separation here is why you see Jim Acosta of CNN when he goes to a Trump rally, like he did in Florida at Tampa, and you have the crowd shouting at CNN saying that they're fake news. Because what they're telling everyone, how horrible things are, that the world's going to end, the economy is crushing, that everything is bad, isn't matching the reality that people are seeing, which is that there are more jobs, people are getting paid more money, they're getting bonuses, the economy is flourishing, and we're closer to peace across the world. We're closer to it than we've been in decades. Yeah, you're going to be told, Jim Acosta, that you're talking about fake news and CNN is fake when you're pumping out negatives that don't match the empirical reality that people are living with. Yeah. And so there's your answer to Trump anxiety disorder, which I believe is actually news anxiety disorder. It's reject the mindset that they're trying to program into you. Reject that their 2-minute little news clip is trying to tell you, you should think this is bad, even though everything says it's good. Go with the empirical data. Same way I looked at President Obama. I don't consider Obama a bad president because he was a bad guy. I don't say that. I say that he was a bad president because his policies had negative impacts, that they were negative outcomes. They either took away freedom or they made the country worse economically and geopolitically. That's why. Same reason why before President Obama was in office, Jimmy Carter was considered the worst president in the modern era. Why? Not because Jimmy Carter's a bad person. He has his issues, yes, but he's not an evil person or a bad person. He was just an ineffective president. And that's just empirical. That's just the data. That's just the proof. It has nothing to do with whether he personally is a good person or a bad person. You know, he's a decent Christian. He runs around. He has relatively a good heart. He has some issues. He's a little anti-Jewish, but other than that, Jimmy Carter's a pretty decent person from all indications. A little bit racist as well, but you know, other than that, he's fine. But he's still a bad president. The empirical data was there. It showed us. We had the proof. We had the proof with Obama. We have the exact opposite proof with President Trump. Don't go with what they're trying to tell you. Go with what's actually there. And I think that would resolve it for a lot of people. Either that or there's going to be huge sales in Xanax, and there goes your next investment in the stock market. You know, until 2020, when we have the next election, lots and lots of Xanax. Whatever company's making it, there you go. That's your investment. But with that said, I'm going to take a quick break, and then we'll come back and we'll cover a little bit more of a couple of other ideas. Well, a situation that I had, and I think it's worth talking about. And we'll be back in just a moment. Okay?
I say, lady, I'm feeling like we ain't got no damn patience. Excuses why we cannot do this face to face, and then we cry, wonder why we ain't on the same damn page. If there's one thing I know, it's that this world keeps turning, and no one seems concerned. Whoa, that this world keeps turning. That's one thing I learned. 'Cause mama don't sleep at night since the sun done up and down. Ain't no brother's keeper. And no one looking out for the sisters either. And these families ain't no family. And no one giving second chances. I don't understand why. It seems like this world keeps turning. No one seems concerned. Yeah. Lately I'm feeling like you don't seem to be the same way. Excuses, but it's written on your face. And then we fight another night. This time we've been wasting. No, I don't understand why we could have it all, throw it all away. Just cause everything we want don't go our way. Why? Just take a look outside, people losing lives. I'm just trying to see this world this much bigger than you and I. Lady, I'm feeling like we could make this all okay. No excuses, girl, we need to find a way and take our time, do this right before this all fades away. Cause if there's one thing I learned, it's that this world keeps turning. If there's one thing I learned, it's that this world keeps turning. No one seems concerned. It's that this world keeps turning. No one seems concerned. It's that this world keeps turning. No one seems concerned.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining me back here at the ever popular No Soundbites Allowed podcast. This is your host, Michael Voss, and I thank you for joining me here. And we're going to have a great show. And I've been having a great show, and I thank everyone for joining me through this and listening in. And I understand you may not agree with everything in the episode, but that's okay because this is us talking about it. We're giving more time to some of the issues and more depth to them so you can think about it and make your own decisions on that because that's important. And I do appreciate the fact that you're listening in and hearing me out, hearing what I have to say, and hearing a bit of the discussion about the issues because you make it worthwhile. And I thank you for that. So far in the episode, we've talked a little bit about the problems with parties making choices instead of people, which I disagree with. We've talked a little bit about the reality of what's going on with the New York 22nd race, about the ability to take photographs and record and understand what people are actually saying versus what someone said that is happening and told you, well, you can't do that. It's kind of like when people tell you your vote doesn't count. But meanwhile, the people who are voting, it counts a whole lot. And the people are saying that, well, they're trying to manipulate you. They only have 3 out of 10 people voting. It's a lot easier to control 3 out of 10 rather than have 7 out of 10 people voting. And they can't control that, my belief. You may disagree. So we were talking about a little bit of the reality there and what happened in Cortland today, both before at the M&D Deli and also thereafter at the Arts and Wine Festival over in Cortland today on August 4th. And then we were talking a little bit about Trump or anxiety disorder, which I believe is more like news anxiety disorder, that disconnect of the reality that's going on in our nation and the way the news is portraying that reality, which doesn't include real facts. It's more of a summary of facts, a very short, very inaccurate description of what's happening on a large scale and how that's causing some people to have a lot of anxiety and a lot of hangups because they're hearing this from the news and it's supposed to be true and it's on TV. It's got to be true. And yet it isn't true. And so they're a little anxious about that because they can't figure out, well, which one am I supposed to believe? The reality I see or the news that's telling me I should think like this, that I should believe their reality, the way they describe it. And I think that's a decision a lot of people have to make. And if we can see this continuing the process the way it's going, well, you're going to get a lot more anxious people and someone should be buying shares of Xanax like crazy, my opinion. But I wanted to finish this up, though, with a very simple thought. A little bit speaking about anxiety and the disconnect, the disparity there of what's real and what's implied and what people think versus what happens. I was talking to a gentleman this week he's a self-described lefty, his words, lefty. He's very much into social, liberal, progressive ideals. He falls under that progressive ideology by his own description, and also by his donations to campaigns and his association with a couple of campaigns as well here locally in the Broome County Southern Tier region. And he knows who I am. He knows I'm on the opposite side of him politically, and that's fine. And we are sometimes interacting socially at various places. And decent guy. I have no personal problems with him. We've had conversations. We've joked around. Decent time. So he's a human being, which is fine. And we had a decent conversation. We were having a conversation, not arguing, not shouting, not hating each other, because that isn't what happened. We were just having a conversation. We had a dispute about some economic issues. And that's where it caught me. And I just noticed, especially in thinking about the Trump anxiety disorder, this disconnect between the reality, this disassociation with reality, because he considers himself to be a progressive. And he believes and he loves, as an example, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Anthony Brindisi. He believes in them. He thinks they're great characters, especially Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And he loves it. And he says, he believes in that socialist democracy. But at the same time, he's trying to also argue with me, saying, well, we need to be a completely laissez-faire economy. And just to explain that to people, if you're not familiar with the term, it means that there is no holds barred, that it's a completely capitalist, it's completely open markets. There are no tariffs. There are no taxes. There is no impediment, no government regulation on business. Business runs itself. Government has hands off and leaves business alone. That's what he's telling me he believes. This is a progressive, an individual who calls himself a lefty, someone who says that he loves Ocasio-Cortez. And I'm sitting there going, how can you say that? Because I do believe in some restrictions on government, on business. Business should have some restrictions in some cases. Government is there to do for the public what the public cannot do for itself. And that means that there are some safeguards that should be in there for business. Not a lot. We don't need massive amounts of regulation, but we need some regulation just to make sure. Otherwise we get child labor, which we all agree is wrong. Okay, that's a regulation. That's government interference. When we say that, 10-year-olds can't work and 12-year-olds and 15-year-olds can't work, especially at factories, for 12 hours a day, well, that's because of government regulation, not business. And that's not because businesses are evil. It's the function of business that they want workers, cheap workers that can last a long, long time doing very specific jobs. We put in regulations because we don't agree with that, and that there should be some restrictions on business. This gentleman's telling me no. But somehow he's trying to put together, and I'm using that example, especially with the kids, to try and square this way. And it's an example of this lack of clarity, lack of connection. We hear about Medicare for all as an example. That's off of Ocasio-Cortez's platform. And we're talking about $32 trillion, not billion, $1 trillion. We're talking about literally the entire income of America right now. We have about, if you go to us.clock.org, you'll see that currently the U.S. debt, taxes, all taxes, payroll taxes, business taxes, individual taxes, put it all together, you get about $3.3 billion. You would have to spend every single dime of that to pay for Medicare under the plan of Medicare for all. That doesn't mean that the quality of service would be up. It doesn't mean that people would be treated better, but it does mean that this is what it would cost. You would literally have to significantly double the cost. And this is not just me saying that. There have been studies that have done on this. Not one, several. And even Bernie Sanders, who came up with this idea first, has never done, he didn't want to even look at the numbers because he knows it's too expensive. It cannot be done. It's not effective. It would destroy the U.S. economy if you were to do this. And the amount of taxes and cost that it would be is just astronomical. You're talking about well over doubling all taxes. That's for businesses, that's for people, which goes in line with what Nancy Pelosi has been saying for a while now. If Democrats win the 2018 elections, and probably if they win 2020 as well, that they're looking at trying to increase taxes and take away all the gains that we've seen so far so that they can pay for their spending. So they could take that money that we were otherwise going to put in our pockets and create businesses and jobs and employ people. And instead, they want to use it to spend on a couple of programs for people instead. So when I'm listening to this gentleman and understanding that, and these are the words of Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Ocasio-Cortez, I'm listening to what they're saying they want to do with the economy. And I'm listening to this gentleman who tells me he's a progressive, that he's a lefty, that he's a socialist Democrat, and he's telling me he believes in hands-free, hands-off economy and business, and that there shouldn't be regulations, there shouldn't be taxes and tariffs. I don't understand. No wonder there's a derangement. Does that make sense to anyone? How can you be socialist and still, but yet have an economy that's not socialist? They don't go together. They're opposed to each other. And you don't get that. And in fact, that's not what Ocasio-Cortez is asking for. She doesn't want an economy that is robust. She doesn't want an economy that is fewer regulations and more freedom for businesses, let alone for individuals. No, what she's looking for is to wipe that out. I mean, she's very much for gun control and an assault weapons ban. There goes the Second Amendment. She's looking at a federal jobs guarantee. So much for that socialist idea. And this guy's for it. The gentleman's talking to me and he's telling me he's for these things. He stands by her views. Federal jobs guarantee. What? How has that got anything to do with a free economy and business and letting business run business? Is it a tariff? No. But so what? Think of the other consequences. Think of the other things that are involved. And see, that was his focus. Well, I don't understand the tariff. How do you get around that? How does that work for everyone? It's a horrible, horrible thing. It's bad for business. Meanwhile, he wants to support things that are even worse for business. He wants to make it so that people have a guaranteed minimum wage. Well, that's not free business. That doesn't make sense. If you're telling me you're worried about a tariff, but no, you want to have the federal government guarantee a minimum wage and an excessively high one at that, well, then how can you tell me you want free business and free trade? They don't go together. You can't do that. See, there's the dissociation I see. And I think people need to stop and think for a second. They're so busy trying to justify what the news is saying to them and what certain political leaders are saying to them, that they should feel a certain way, that they should feel upset, that they should feel that these things aren't working, regardless of the empirical facts that are there, and regardless of the illogic of the other side, of the argument and the discussion by them, saying that, no, we need to raise taxes because that's good, and fewer jobs is good for the economy. And by the way, we're going to spend that extra money on something that's even worse for the economy, that's going to restrict jobs even more. But you should be in favor of that because that's what the news said you should be feeling. That's what a political party is saying. That's their partisan viewpoint, and you should be happy about that rather than the empirical data that says, hey, you've got more freedom and more success, but you should feel bad about that. Stop. Think about what you're saying. And I'm not saying that you can't be a socialist Democrat. I'm not saying that. And I'm not saying that that's an evil thing. I'm not going to say that. I don't agree with it, but I'm not saying that it's evil. I'm not saying that it's wrong. I'm saying it doesn't make sense to me. When you're making a discussion, when you're having a debate about the issues, we weren't picking on each other personally. It's not our personal views. We're talking about the issues and the policies. And you can't be consistent enough in that policy to say, well, on one hand, I want the government to guarantee jobs. I want the government to be involved in the minimum wage and interfering with business. But at the same time, I believe in business taking care of itself. You can't say those two things. They don't go together. You're confused. That is not a logical statement. You don't understand the issue you're talking about. And I understand, yes, politicians are saying that. Yes, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is saying that. I understand Nancy Pelosi is saying that. Anthony Brindisi is saying that. It doesn't make sense. Stop and think about it. They're talking about opposing ideas and saying it's all one great package and it'll work. It doesn't work. It opposes itself. The two different ideas don't work together. And that's what I want you to think about. Consider that. Put it together. When we have parties, the leadership of parties, making decisions for the public, at the same time that we have the news media telling us how we're supposed to feel, whether it's on social media or other ways, when we have the news media working with those leaders and directing people to believe a certain thing, even though empirical data doesn't provide that same answer, and when they're telling us to feel a certain way that is directly opposed to the reality that should make us feel better, that's not right. And you need to stop and say, hey, rather than just running on that bandwagon and saying blindly, well, that's what I believe. It's fantastic. It's a great thing. Stop. Think about it. And actually consider what you're actually agreeing to. And consider, what do these things actually mean? Because they don't go together. Every time I've had this conversation, it doesn't make sense to me. Because they're talking about opposing ideas and putting it all into one big bow, wrapping it with a bow and say, hey, this is a fantastic idea. And I'm sitting there going, you really have not thought this through, because it doesn't make sense to me. And it doesn't make sense to anyone logically. I know it may feel good. It may sound good, but it doesn't make sense when you stop and actually think about it and say, what are the consequences of what you're talking about? How does that actually work? When has it ever worked? So you don't have to agree with me, but I want you to consider that. You have the news media and you have political leaders saying, no, it's going to work. It's great. Do what we say and you're fine. Anything else is bad. Meanwhile, you're being given examples of anything else they're talking about, and it works. I have to tell you, I find it interesting. Anthony Brindisi says, well, Claudia Tenney doesn't talk to the public. I was at an event where the public was talking with Claudia Tenney, invited freely to ask anything they want to record it, which you can't do with Anthony Brindisi. He doesn't want people to record things unless he says so. That's not freedom. That's not the way you convince people to vote for you, by saying, hey, you know what, come up to my event, but you can't record anything, so you can't remember what I said, so you can't hold it against me. What? And by the way, don't even look at the other side. Don't even look at my opponent, because trust me, it's just all bad. I'm sorry, you're a politician. No, I don't just trust you. No, I don't care what party you're in. I'm not going to just trust you because you said so. I'm going to find out for myself, because that's how it works in America. You don't get to tell me what I believe. You don't get to tell me what the other person's saying. You get to tell me what you think they said, and I get to go and find out for sure. That's the way it's supposed to be. But that's not what we're seeing. And that's why we see people with these anxieties, because they're trying to work out these two different things. Well, that's what they're telling me, and I'm supposed to believe them, and that's not what's happening. I don't know. That's just my thoughts on it. Maybe you agree, maybe you don't. But it's something to think about. It's food for thought, and that's the whole purpose of the program, to give you food for thought on some of these issues and to really go into them a little bit longer than the 30 seconds, the minute and a half, the 2 minutes maybe that you'll hear in the news, because they deserve more discussion and more understanding. And maybe at the end of the day, you still don't agree with me, or maybe you don't agree with the news, or maybe you don't agree with any of it. That's fine. That's your right. But it's best to be informed to make the best decision about that. And I hope that this has helped you a little bit. And of course, we're going to include links of everything I've been talking about so you can see it for yourself. But until then, I want to thank everybody for having been here to put up with me for the last hour and listening. I do appreciate it, and I do thank you for it. And I'm always open to hear your comments, your thoughts, whether we can prove this, questions you have for me. And we're always here, and we're always thanking you. And we're looking forward to hearing you again next week. And we'll be back then. But until then, I want you to join me. We're going to listen to Adam Ate the Apple as our closing song. And I hope you enjoy it as much as I do. And I'll talk to you guys again very, very soon.
Signals coming from a canyon. I've been searching for my companion for so long. Look out, here comes the dawn. Look to my left, look to my right, searching for something, but something ain't right. This glass ain't full, it's fucking empty. Let's play cowboys and Indians. I'll be the cowboy, you be the Indian. I'll shoot my rabbit, shoot your arrows of blue. Struck once, twice, three times a charm. Beautiful woman with a deadly arm. If love weren't a game, I'd be dead forever. Let's play cowboys and Indians. Let's play cowboys and Indians. Let's play all night long. Smoke signals coming from a canyon. I've been searching for my companion for so long.